If a loved one passes away, or if you're planning your estate, you've probably heard the word probate. And you may be wondering, well, what exactly does that mean? My name is Craig Mitchell with Kreig LLC. We've helped a number of families with the probate process in Texas. And in this video, I'll cover what probate means and go through and explain in detail what it covers. Probate is the process, a legal process whereby assets are transferred from one person to another when someone dies. Now, the term is actually broader than that because it can actually encompass many different aspects, not just property transfer. For example, with a Texas probate, probate is often includes transferring assets, but it also includes making funeral arrangements. So really it can start with the funeral arrangements and who has the right to make those decisions as to what happens to the body or the remains. It can include the court process, which can start with an application, decisions about who gets appointed, whether there's a will or no will, and then who ultimately is entitled to assets. Before you actually make distributions, probate can include issues related to creditors and third parties and the order in which they get paid or don't get paid. And then once there's distributions, it's whether there's partial distributions or full distributions and in what order and to whom. So there is the court process. There's also sometimes litigation and contests related to probate. That can include will contests, that can include disputes over common law spouses or adopted children. There's quite a few different aspects of probate litigation that can come up. Not every estate has to go through probate. So there are several instances where there are alternatives that may be more appropriate than doing a full probate. And these circumstances depend on whether there's a will or no will. They also depend on whether there's minors involved or any incapacitated heirs. And it also depends on whether there's likely to be unpaid debts or contests. When I think of probate, I usually think of it in two different categories, if you will. The first category and the goal is to get appointed. The second category is everything that happens after you're appointed. So in the first category, there are several steps that have to happen. The first is it starts generally with an application. That application is filed with the clerk to set the court hearing. And depending on whether there's a will or no will, there may be other steps, such as appointing an attorney ad litem when there's no will to do an investigation to make sure the application is correct. Now, after a certain period of time, the court will set the application for a hearing, and if approved, the person will be appointed as either the executor or the administrator. Now, that gets to the second part of probate, and for the everything after being appointed, there are several different steps. The executor or administrator's legal duty starts from that date forward, and as part of their duty, they have to gather the assets, they have to notify creditors or third parties of any claims and the need to submit claims, and then they have to evaluate claims as to whether they're going to be paid or how much. And then after that process, there is an inventory that's generally filed with the court. Once approved, after that, then the executor or administrator can consider making distributions, either partial or full, and the timing of doing so. For a typical uncontested probate in Texas, it is not a fast process. And that is intentional. So when the legislature came up with our probate process in Texas, there are several waiting periods, and those are built in so that third parties can be notified of the probate. The probate process can be somewhat slow in Texas. Generally, as a rule of thumb, it's not faster than 6 months, and that's if everything goes smoothly and there's no disputes. More realistically, most probates last longer than that, and in fact, there may be some reasons to hold probate open for years. So the cost for a probate varies depending on the amount of work that's required. So there are probate alternatives that are slightly cheaper if you can do one of those. So in a typical case that goes straight through without too many complications, a probate just in the attorney's fees can cost about $3,000. If there are complications or additional work that needs to be done, then it can be more than that. And in addition, there's court costs. And so, for example, if there is no will, very easily the court will have another $1,000 of court fees. Even if there is a will, the court fees are $300–400 depending on the county. So for example, on the court costs, some counties require that you prepay that before the probate can even be started with the court. Others let you pay that on the back end. As far as attorney's fees, we generally get our fee up front, and we bill against it, our fee, we track our time. And then generally, once our clients are appointed as the administrator or executor, they're able to access the decedent's funds and reimburse themselves for our fee. The things you can control are keeping good records, making sure that you're keeping others like third parties such as heirs or other beneficiaries, and either creditors and other third parties such as spouses, surviving spouses, keeping them apprised of the estate. The reason why you usually want to do that is probates often end up in disputes. People are often stressed out. They're often wondering what an executor or administrator is doing or not doing. They're often skeptical. And so these things often get questioned. So by keeping good records, you're able to actually prove what you did or didn't do. And then by keeping people apprised, you're usually heading off disputes before they even happen. And so if you're asking for tips, keeping good records and keeping people apprised can go a long way to making the probate process more efficient and save you money in the long run. Losing a loved one is never easy, but understanding the probate process in Texas can make it less stressful and more straightforward. If you found this video helpful, and we'd ask that you hit the like button and subscribe and leave a probate related question in the comments. Thank you for watching.